between Amelia and Alexandra, who is our lead candidate. And then questions from you. When you ask questions, please come up here to the mic, and then we can film that. Thank you so much. Who would like to start from the candidates who've come a long way? All right, Ollie, keep the line down. Ollie's going to start. Ollie.
Yeah, hi everyone. Well, I won't say very much. I'm Ollie. I was Ollie Sykes. I was a councillor for 8 years in Brighton Hove Council. Stopped doing that 2 weeks ago. Slightly bittersweet time, but I'm standing to be an MEP. I put myself forward. Just trying to remember what I put in my statement. I've worked in the environmental field, environmental assessment, and that's worked for some time when I wasn't a councillor. And one of the strongest elements of being in the European Union for me is the amazing environmental legislation that the European Union has. Exciting stuff like the Water Framework Directive. I just love the Water Framework Directive. And, the Habitats and Species Directive, things like that. And the irony is that this country, the UK, has played a really important part in forming that legislation. And the European Union is both sets the rules and is an enforcer. So whatever the Brexiteers say, oh, we'll have the same legislation if and when we leave the EU, you won't have anyone there to enforce that fantastic environmental legislation. So that's just one tiny element for me about the importance of being part of this Europe-wide family of nations that looks after the environment, looks after the climate, or tries to, could do a lot better, but the importance of being together to work on some of these issues. So that's part of the reason why I stood, and I'll hand over to one of my colleagues.
I'm Leslie. I'm from down the road in Ada. I was chair of Ada Green Party for 3 years. Very different world. So we're predominantly Leave. UKIP really were taking the reins. So bad boys of Brexit. I know them very well. I speak to them most days. They come and shout at us at the farmers market and whatnot. So, familiar story. But anyway, the reason I stood, it's really interesting hearing Ollie's story because I haven't heard that before. And I'm coming from a slightly different perspective because I come from a human rights background. So I work in human rights and international peacekeeping. And I love the Green Party because it offers the full package. We do say no to climate change, but we also talk about human rights. And human rights are absolutely to the core of my heart. And in fact, I love the European Union because of the European Convention on Human Rights, which has given me as a woman equal pay. It's given me as a parent the right to paid leave, and it's given me many, many things. It also gives me a framework to campaign for human rights, and I'd be deeply worried if we left the European Union that we would lose those protections, and I'm quite sure we would, and I think it would be quite a fast, slippery slope. So that's just to give my bit to sort of complement Ollie's bit. And the other reason I'm so keen on Europe is working in peacekeeping. I've seen very clearly how all around Europe, around the European Union, there has been conflict. So we've had conflict in the Balkans, we've had the conflict around the former Soviet Union. I'm working a lot in Ukraine at the moment, so that's getting annexed, pieces are getting annexed by Russia. So this is all around us, North Africa, and we have been protected by the European Union. And I think we take that for granted. And I think that's something that we really need to fight for, and often we don't hear about that. But those of us who work in peacekeeping know just how desperate it might be if we start to fragment this solidarity and internationalism that we have. It's not a joke, it's very serious. So that's me, thank you, great to meet you all, and I'll pass over to Viz.
I think we're representing progressively more Leave areas, aren't we? I've travelled here today from the Isle of Wight, which voted 61% to Leave 3 years ago. But we're very actively involved in Islanders for Europe, and we've got about 400 members on the island of Islanders for Europe. And when this opportunity came up to stand, to me, it seems, as a history teacher, we're at a historical crossroads. And I teach A-level, and 3 aspects of A-level that I teach are directly looking at the challenging times we're facing in terms of political extremism, economic hardship, social inequality. because I teach the Cold War, I teach anti-Semitism in Germany, and I teach the English Civil War. And there are so many parallels every day in those three elements that I teach. I haven't been to Brighton before, apart from for a week when I was at the University of Sussex. Before I joined the Green Party, I was doing an Open University degree in science, geology, and then I went into renewable energy and technologies and engineering, and then realised that that was the biggest things that we were having to face, and I joined the Green Party. So thank you, Brighton and the Open University for that. My day job is teaching, and I spend a huge amount of time with young people, and we had visiting German exchange students that came to talk and to learn about the Isle of Wight, and they could not believe that we would go through with Brexit. We were talking about freedom of movement, and they said, every young person wants to be able to travel, wants to be able to live and love and work and play across all boundaries, and they look at us like we were mad, and unfortunately the last 3 years have not taught me anything different. So it's absolutely brilliant to be able to travel here and to feel a big part of that, because what I really do value about this whole thing is how it's actually brought people together as much as it's tearing people apart. And I think we need to remember that in this disaster and the literature that's coming through your doors with a whole host of very concerning words, that we are together and we are fighting this, and we are talking about the great positives that Europe can bring. Saying that, I'm going to pass on to you two guys to talk about the bad boys of Brexit, which what the Green Party offers is hope in that, and that message of hope. And looking at the European President elections this week, and that message coming from the Green Party there was very much that we know we've got climate disasters and social and political and economic disasters. If you look at our policies, we're offering that hope. Thank you.
Amelia, thank you.
Thank you so much for being here tonight on what is such an important election. I want to begin by thanking you all for not giving up hope that we would get to this election. And I hope that you won't be giving up hope that the people that we elect will be in that European Parliament for the next 5 years. Because we must continue to challenge Brexit, and we know that when we elect Greens to the European Parliament, the difference that they'll make will be around these incredible different skills that we see from our candidates. Whether that's working on human rights, environmental protection, being embedded in our communities. What an inspiring group of people, and the fact that we are here in a seat that has so much history for the Green Party, with it once being where Caroline Lucas represented the South East when she was MEP, was it 10 years ago now? It's hard to work out with general elections, how many general elections she's won. And what an incredible thing to have, an opportunity to be part of a European Union where you can live, love and work in 27 member states, an opportunity to fight for progress, ensuring that we have clear legislation that works internationally, because so many of our issues will only be changed on an international level. Climate change. Fundamentally, we must be working with our family in Europe to ensure that we stay within 1.5 degrees of warming. I am so proud of what our Greens have achieved in the European Union. And as you may know, or may not know, the Greens are part of a bigger group. We work as Greens across the whole of Europe, and in fact come together as a European Green Party once every 6 months to discuss, debate and vote on policies that we share on an international basis to make sure that we are united in working for change. 27 countries, 28 countries, so many different languages, but we all share the same language of compassion, social justice, environmental justice and peace. And the fact that we're able to make those changes, I've seen just inspiring work from every MEP that we've elected. What a track record we have. Whether that's Molly Scott-Cato in the South East, tackling tax evasion. I think it's funny because obviously as Greens we have a lot of stereotypes. I won't go into them, but I'm often needing to tell people that I don't wear sandals unless I'm on the beach. But anyway, and I don't have a beard, which apparently shocks people. There we go. people would make assumptions about our ability to work on economics, but actually, as we've seen here in Brighton, it's our economic skills that have ensured that we're keeping libraries open, and that track record of actually challenge how local economics works meant that we could build such a brighter future here in Brighton. And it's Molly Scott-Cato, our economist, who's actually in the European Union tackling tax evasion, being there when IKEA was dodging €1 billion. I nearly said pounds, but it's much for muchness these days. And she was out there challenging those loopholes that are being used, from tax loopholes and money laundering that takes away from our communities. When people do not pay their fair share of tax, they are taking away from each and every one of us. They are taking from our communities. They are part of the problem that means that we don't have enough money to fund our schools, to fund our hospitals, and fund our basic services. But also our MEPs have been working on challenging austerity, which takes away from us as well, and how we work internationally of even creating a report to look into what's happened in Greece and how we could improve on austerity issues there. And we know that while we've been talking about Brexit, and I don't know what you feel about Brexit, but for me, Brexit has been an incredible distraction. We should never have been here. And actually, in this time that we've been talking about Brexit, there have been 2 reports that have come out from the UN. One telling us we've got just 11 years to tackle the worst effects of climate change, and one telling us that due to man-made human activity, we are going to lose 1 million species. We need to take action now. To be honest, the best time to take action was 30 years ago. The second best time is to take action now. When just yesterday in the papers they said that koalas are fundamentally on the way to extinction. These key species that you would never believe could disappear from our planet are at risk. And when people say about the 11 years that we've got to tackle climate change, that doesn't mean we've got 11 years to put policy in place. That means we've got 11 months to put policy in place to ensure that it's effective in time to mitigate against those effects. We've just watched parts of the Solomon Islands disappear underwater today, and that action cannot be delayed. And so whether it's making sure that we are putting our strong voice behind a Remain party that's been consistently Remain, when we had Caroline Lucas standing in front of Westminster the morning after the EU referendum saying that we must fight for a people's vote because we need to have democracy at the next stage. We need to make sure that when the deal is on the table that people have a final say on what happens, because nobody signs a contract without reading the small print. And now we've got the small print in front of us, we must have that people's vote. We've got an opportunity to make sure that we put people into that European Parliament that will be tackling climate change in those vital few months to ensure we've got international policy to mitigate against those effects. And we'll have people there standing up for your human rights, your workers' rights, environmental protection and peace, the fundamental things that I am proud to be European about. So this European election, I feel like we've got such opportunities to prove that here in the southeast, here in Brighton and in other areas in this community, that we want to make sure that we have a clear vote, not just for now and today, but for our future too. And ensuring that we have more Green MEPs elected is the best way to achieve that. And it's such an honour to be here with such inspiring candidates, and here with Alex, who's been working in the council to make changes for many of you in this room, ensuring that politics is driving a politics is what politics should be about people, about communities, about you and how we work for you. So I will begin by talking to Alex about some of her hopes and ambitions in the European Parliament.
Yes, thank you, Amelia.
You've done incredible work here in Brighton, and I think that the Brighton Green Party has so much to celebrate. Brighton and Hove Green Party.
I nearly walked out then.
Pick it up quickly.
I'm just like, I can't tell you how mortified I am. That was. Can you just tell us what some of your proudest achievements on that local level?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't take all credit for it, especially considering there are quite a few Green councillors and ex-Green councillors in the room. But I think I'll just begin by saying that, you know, I think people often look to Brighton and Hove because we have been in administration here and because we're in official opposition at the moment from other parts of the country, and they don't think that they can quite get there. But we haven't just appeared here. And in 1996, I think it was, Pete West was elected onto Brighton Council as it was then, and as a lonely first Green. And it's really since then, and it's been honestly the hard work of individuals over the last 2 decades and more where we've managed to double our numbers almost each time. And so we've achieved a huge amount. You know, I mean, you talk about economic policies and, you know, what we've done with the budget here in Brighton and Hove. And we can thank Ollie here for a lot of that work. We were really missed that going forward. I hope that he'll be able to come in and give us some advice on that going forward, because we really managed to do a lot, not only when we were in administration and we had a lot of cuts coming down from central government, and as you say, you know, protect libraries, we brought out a living wage, we did so much for the city, but actually also when we were the third, largest party, or the smallest party, you know, we amended this last budget enormously. We injected £7 million back into housing and homelessness, for example. So our weight is not only when we're in administration, it's also in opposition or when we're the smallest party. And I think that says a lot to other parties across the country about what they can achieve as 1 councillor or 3 councillors or 6 councillors or more. Actually, it's a huge amount. And it's thanks to the work here that we've got Caroline Lucas as an MP for Brighton Pavilion. It's based on that local work and expanding our numbers. And it will be thanks to the work that we've achieved here that hopefully I, and maybe more, will be elected next week and work across the region. I mean, I'm privileged to be in the company of 3 of our 10 other candidates here. And the work that they're all doing in their local communities is enormous. And even places like Vix on the Isle of Wight, you know, where you do have quite a huge Tory right-wing Brexit contingent. But I was pleasantly surprised when I visited there the other day that people also are very open and independent-minded. And the work that Greens have managed to do there to kind of, you know, persuade those people, even in a general election, to support us, will really help our vote share next week. So it is down to kind of local politics that we managed to secure seats in general elections and in European elections. And I'm very hopeful that next week, with the Green momentum behind us and all of the work that everyone's doing in terms of getting leaflets out, because unfortunately that's still what wins it. It's not all on social media and everything, it's what people receive through their front doors. It's going to mean that next week, you know, we have been predicted in one poll that we'll win 8 seats across the entire country. So I'm very hopeful that we'll do well next week.
Brilliant. And I've seen Vix convince Leave voters to vote for her because she's got such integrity on what she stands for. And I think that that's really what's inspiring about so many of our candidates, is that integrity that they show in communities. That means that this isn't just about Leave or Remain. I hope that was the general election, but this is beyond Leave or Remain. This is about who we want to have representation. The fact that we are a Remain party and we want to celebrate that is just one part of it. And so with so moving up to the European elections, you've delivered so much locally, and I think your passion for the community has always really shone through. What do you want to be taking to the European Parliament now? What are your kind of vision and aims?
Well, I've got a couple of quite big things. I'd like an EU-wide living wage, because I think we need some level of parity across Europe. I'm proud that as a party we will defend migrants and migration, and that is at the core of our politics. And I think we need to see some parity, and we also need it here as well as elsewhere for young people who at the moment are You know, I look at my time when I was much younger, and I've benefited enormously from us being part of the European Union. I left Liverpool at the age of 18 and spent 4 years working and living and studying and loving and travelling in Paris and the rest of France and Europe. But I was in Paris for 4 years and then in Brussels working for Caroline for a year when she was an MEP. And it just feels very much like, you know, all of those things that I've benefited from, and now I speak fluent French. My German isn't too bad, but it's not as good as my French. Don't test me now, Ollie. I'm looking at you. Is that, you know, I came back and I was a languages teacher in a secondary school, and brought with me all of that cultural knowledge as well, which is so important, I think, and people often don't spell out. And so I've benefited from it. Many people in this room will have benefited enormously in lots of different ways of us being part of Europe. And it feels like we've just kicked the ladder down for this younger generation. So I think, you know, I want to get in there fast. I hope we're in there for 5 years, but if we're only in there until October, there's a lot of work that needs to be done straight away in terms of that EU-wide living wage and in terms of an EU-wide Green New Deal. You know, the Green New Deal, I worked for Caroline in Europe, 12 years ago now, and that was when the Green New Deal and her work with Anne Pettifor was really coming to the fore. But it feels more relevant now than it ever has done before. And providing people with stability, certainty, good jobs, a decent wage. You know, a lot of those causes of Brexit we need to address, and they're best addressed across Europe. And they need to be, all of these issues are European-wide, they're actually global, international issues, and that's where we need to address them. But I think particularly for young people, this election is really relevant to them. So an EU-wide living wage and an EU-wide Green New Deal. I don't need to explain what the Green New Deal is to anyone.
I think you explain it just in case, because I find it really inspiring in itself. So
So the Green New Deal, it essentially invests a huge amount of money in and kickstarts an economy in the way that happened in the 1930s, for example, and it allows us to create jobs, good jobs in renewable energies, energy efficiency. So, for example, people's bills would be going down because their houses are probably insulated and they're dependent on renewable electricity, perhaps from the solar panels on their roof. So it's a complete shift in the way that we're living now, which not only is going to contribute enormously to the climate crisis that we're facing, but it's also going to provide people with jobs, which so many people need, and good jobs paying a good wage with a good future. So it's a really great package to be part of, and we so badly need it in this country and across Europe.
Because I think as Greens, in fact, we always ensure that social justice, economic justice and environmental policies intertwined, because you need to have it, it needs to be linked to ensure that we're building a better future. And I just think that it's such a powerful policy that's, I mean, it feels like it should have been happening years ago when it was first proposed, but obviously with its rise in popularity and people's rising change of, rising awareness of climate as well has been fundamental.
It's a pivotal, that's right, and it's a pivotal time for us. It really does feel like now is our time as a political movement because of what you say. We've had the climate strikes from young people, Greta Thunberg, David Attenborough programs, and of course Extinction Rebellion. It really feels that we're reaching way beyond the cohort of people that usually vote for us or follow us in droves. And it makes me so proud to be part of this party at the moment because of that. I've been a member for quite a long time, 16 odd years, and I've always felt a little bit uncomfortable that the vast majority of people who've been voting for us have tended to be white, middle class, educated. But I feel now that we are really a genuine party when we're picking up seats in the local elections in places like Thanet in Kent, which is Nigel Farage land, in places like Folkestone, which is really very working class, and where I'm from and Martin's from and some other people from in the northwest of England, in places like St Helens and Wigan. Like, this is unheard of. We have in the past, you know, had the odd few seats where individuals have really just gone for it. So in Solihull, for example, Chris Williams, that has just been an individual effort building a party there, and that's quite different from what we're seeing at the moment, because it's across the board from the southeast to the northwest of England. We are getting people to vote for us who've never voted for us before and who our policies most affect. And I think that was what frustrated me previously. We had all of these policies for a certain cohort of people by and large, yet they weren't the people who we were communicating well enough with for them to then vote for us, but that's all changing now.
And I think that also, so it's not just policies as time has come, it's when I was in the Wirral, in Tranmere Ward, it's those very people who've been worst affected by issues like austerity, by the failure of government policy, and where they've had a Green elected, as a result of his hard work in the community, they saw the power that voting Green makes. And we've seen the difference here in Brighton of the difference that Greens make. I see the difference that just one Green in the room can make in many places. And in the European Parliament, it's really as a result of that Green group that we have embedded so many of these kind of vital, ambitious policies around social and environmental justice. Do you have a, working on such a kind of broad basis with the European Parliament, have you got kind of key, so you've got your kind of key policies, what are your key ambitions of what the future of Europe could look like?
Oh wow. Well, mine is quite a rosy ambition and maybe probably doesn't kind of hit reality so much. Because the future of Europe for me is that, you know, in this election we'll go from being the joint sixth largest party in the European Parliament to being like the first largest, you know, like the biggest party, and we'll be really radical and everything will change, you know, economic policy, social justice will improve, you know, we'll really fight the climate and biodiversity crisis which is facing us. But that may not be a reality. But that's where I think that we should aim. That's what we should aim for. And, you know, we've got a huge group in the Greens European Free Alliance. There's 52, you know, MEPs. So I think that says a lot to people in this country who perhaps know about Caroline Lucas and that we've got one MP, and perhaps in their local communities they know of a few councillors. But, you know, the weight of 52 MEPs at the moment, and it's projected to rise because of this momentum that we've got behind us across Europe for the Green project. You know, there's an awful lot that we can achieve there. And I know that, you know, for 20 years, we've had Caroline, we've had Keith, and the amazing work that they've done, and they've got huge shoes to fill. But I'm confident that building on their work, and you know, Keith's done a huge amount on air quality, for example. He's been co-chair of the Animal Welfare Intergroup. You know, Caroline is a big heavyweight when it comes to trade and trade policy, and also worked on some of the more tricky directives like the REACH rules that came in the early 2000s around plastics and chemicals in our environment. But also, you know, no one, I mean, Jean annoys me so much because she's done so much good work, yet she doesn't talk about it. And Jean Lambert's done a huge amount on workers' rights, women's rights. Some of the stuff that you were talking about, Leslie, that is thanks to Jean Lambert in the European Parliament, yet she doesn't chat about it very much. And in the Southwest, as you've already explained, Molly is our heavyweight on economic policy. I would really like to, you know, negotiate being part of some of the, and I don't know how it will work with the other Greens if they think that we're only going to be in there until October. But I'm hoping, because they're Greens, they will welcome us into their family and they will be sure that we'll be there for 5 years. But I would like to negotiate some of the committee membership where I might be best placed. So things like transport, which I've worked on before, obviously the environment I would love to sit on, but also women's rights. I've got a health background, so I work for Terence Higgins Trust, which is the largest HIV and sexual health charity in England, Scotland and Wales, and also kind of my work in education. So I think I can offer them a range of things. I'm not sure yet how us Brits are going to be received, so I suppose that's just something that I'll have to see when we get there, but it's quite exciting. The first meetings take place at the end of May, and then we've got meetings in June with the group before the Parliament starts in July, and then it's quite a gruelling schedule of being in Strasbourg twice that month, and then in Brussels twice as well, but luckily we're off in August, so I'll be able to take August to recoup and then decide where best my efforts are spent. But I think, considering we might not be there for a long time, we need to get a really big bang for our buck, and also that means media work, so it means things that will get picked up in the media. It's a huge region, and I think part of our role as MEPs is to explain to other people across the region the value of having MEPs, who they are and what they do. So that also will be a big part of my work.
Brilliant. And I think you touched on Jean Lambert's work. So Jean has been our MEP in London for 20 years. And I think that's, she's all about the hard work and the graft and not necessarily the communications. But there was a point where papers were talking about the very first politicians that were going to the jungle in Calais. And we were like, they're not the first. Jean Lambert's been 12 times or something. Because she's been at the forefront of championing the rights of refugees from countries all over the world. And I think that one of the things that I've been really proud of as Greens is that we have been so uncompromising really on the rights of refugees, as well as making sure that we support freedom of movement as an incredible thing. With these elections, I feel that there are some parties, even Remain parties, that aren't committed to that. What are your thoughts on freedom of movement and how the Greens are championing those rights?
Well, I'm just so pleased that I'm part of a party that will always defend the rights of migrants. And so it makes it very easy when you're on the TV or whether you're in a hustings to approach that subject, whereas a lot of other parties seem quite hemmed in when it comes to it. But freedom of movement is fundamental, and you just can't put a price tag on that or on the EU being what frankly is the greatest peace project that the world has ever seen. And I think those two things alone mean so much to people. It's great to talk about migration and people moving into different countries, the skills that they have. But one thing that I always mention is that, you are more likely to be treated by an immigrant doctor or nurse in the NHS than you are to be standing in a queue behind an immigrant in the NHS. And I think that really shows people that the huge benefit, not only to our economy and our public services, but also to our society as a whole, that immigration brings. And it's not a one-way street. Like I've already explained to you how I benefited from living and working and loving in two other countries, in France and Belgium. And it just opens your horizons. It means that your opportunities increase. And it's a two-way street. I understand why some people voted Leave, and I understand that people who, it's not everyone, but some people who are not that wealthy and who are struggling to put food on the table for their family, they're in very tricky situations because they see that other people arrive here with skills and energy and get jobs. But I think what people need to realise is it's successive governments and policies of austerity that have done that. And it was so refreshing to be at hustings the other evening where a Leave voter stood up and said that he had been so impressed with Caroline's work on listening to Leave voters. And some of you might know this, or you might not, but she's been doing citizens' assemblies up and down the country. She also has another, for anyone who's on Twitter, it's worth following her other Twitter handle, which is Dear Leavers. And there you can watch videos of her engaging, listening and debating issues with them. Because I think that is so important. This country needs to heal. And we are divided as a country. Families are divided, friends are divided on this subject. And we need to come together. And the great thing about Caroline Lucas is she's the only politician that is showing any leadership on the subject.
That's absolutely right.
I was just going to say, before we go to questions,
Yes.
just on immigration, I do think it's, I lived in China for just over a year, and there's something very British about the fact that if people move to the UK, they're called an immigrant, but if we go elsewhere, we're called an expat. As if we could rebrand our own migration to package it as something that we're not going to demonise, but something that we're going to celebrate. I just wanted to do, I feel like, thank you for answering all of those questions, and I'll come to you now, but just on a lighter note question, we've been talking about very inspiring people in the Green Party, inspiring work that's happening. Who inspires you, what inspires you to do what you do in public?
Well, I mean, I've come from quite a political background, I suppose, in many senses, because my dad's a BBC journalist, and he's been a great inspiration to me growing up. But obviously, Caroline, working for her in the European Parliament, opened my eyes, and working for her here on two of her campaigns, getting her elected as the first MP. I mean, all of that journey has just been incredible, as well as the local council elections and getting, so many of us elected back in 2011 and working on that campaign. But I think for me, my dad and Caroline Lucas would be the people who've really driven me.
Brilliant. So I'll open it up to everybody here.
Thank you very much. That was fabulous. So if people can come up and ask questions, here's the mic. Thank you.
Let's form a queue.
Yes, by all means, form a queue. Do form a queue.
Well, David Cameron has got a lot to answer for. Because 3 years ago he called a referendum, but he expected the country to remain in the EU. So what I'm really concerned about now is the two main parties leading us to a no-deal exit. So what I'd like to ask Alexander Phillips is, does she feel, even at this late stage, there is still hope for a second vote and that we can stay in?
Yeah, definitely. I think, Caroline Lucas has been the first party leader to call for a people's vote. Democracy didn't stop in 2016, so asking for more democracy is not a crime. And I think, what I'm quite angry about is the instigation of Article 50, because it was instigated based on advice from the first referendum, which was mired in lies and cheating. So I don't think it should have been instigated in the first place. There is a vote on the 2nd of June, or the week of the 2nd of June, that is due in Parliament. That I was on BBC South East today with a Tory MP who said that he didn't think he was going to support that. And if the government can't even get their own troops to say yes to whatever they're putting on the table, then it's not going to go through. Look, Parliament is at loggerheads, and the only way to resolve this now is to go to a people's vote. I must put my cards on the table in that when I don't agree with 100% of the Green Party policy leading up to a referendum, because I want to remain in the European Parliament, and I think that it should reform, yes, but I didn't think that we should have a referendum on it, especially under the terms that were given, where you wouldn't need at least a 2/3 majority, which is something that I probably would have agreed with, because because that's used in any other civilised democratic country. I mean, even the States, which I wouldn't say, as a half American, I wouldn't even say that is civilised or democratic, but they need 2/3 to change their constitution, which ultimately is what this is doing. So I would have accepted a referendum on those terms, as well as 16 and 17-year-olds having the right to take part in that referendum, Europeans living in this country having a right to take part in that referendum, and who are 3 million strong, and about the same number of people, Brits living abroad, should have taken part in that referendum. So I don't agree that we should have had a referendum as it was, hence we are where we are. And the only way out now, unfortunately, is to turn back to the people. And the problem with it now is that you can't have one referendum where you only need a majority, a simple majority for it to go through, and then change that to a 2/3 majority now. So I think I'm in favour of a people's vote, and for that people's vote to be a simple majority, but for all those people that I've outlined to be able to partake in that referendum. Oh, and one poll says that we're 61% of people currently vote Remain.
We've got a couple more people. I don't know if...
Any other questions? Sally, would you like to say anything? Sorry, was there someone else? Raphael. Oh, sorry.
You want to go first?
Go on, Raphael.
I'm not quite on the stage yet. Alex, you talked about the people, the new working class people that are joining the party, or just agreeing with. But how do you really convince people who are poor, who have to think about how they are going to survive today, who can barely afford to buy cheap food, let alone vegan food, who can barely afford to pay rent or have no home at all, to put solar panels on, to vote green, when people like Farage offer them what seems to be a simple solution and seems to answer all their problems.
I just say, apparently it really annoys him when you call him Farage, so I can think
Because it's like the difference between garage and garage.
I think that, populism is a very easy message. Mussolini, Hitler, Farage, they all do it, and it's because it's a very easy message, and ours is more complicated than that, for sure. But I think what we're doing at the moment is engaging people through austerity, because you've hit the nail on the head as to why large swathes of this country feel disengaged with the establishment and feel let down. And we are challenged because we've got policies that are two sides of a coin. We've got our social justice policies that will speak more loudly to those people right now. And then we've got our environmental justice policies, which might not speak to them as loudly now. We need to make those links a bit better in our communications and maybe talk about the social justice first and then bring the environmental justice second, show them those links. But I think we're doing all this. The great news is, we're doing this really effectively at the moment, so we need to build on that. We need more Greens elected at every level in order to do it.
I don't know if you want to mention the solar panels in Kirklees, because it's not about buying solar panels. There's a way that we can make sure we embed it. But, I don't know if you want to describe what happened there, or I can do it.
You go for it.
So, I think the key part of policy, when you make sure that you're tackling social injustice, as well as making sure that you've got environmental policies, is looking at through a lens of an issue and tackling those two things together. So in one of our wards in Kirklees in Yorkshire, the community were at risk of fuel poverty, which you'll know is where you have to choose between heating your home and putting food on your table. And so it was our Greens on Kirklees Council that ensured that there was who put solar panels on the roofs of some of the poorest communities there to make sure that they had to reduce their energy bills, and actually used it as a loan scheme, which meant that they were able to sell back some of the electricity to the grid. And it's these kind of ideas where it's not, that was a strong economic idea that gave back to the community and made sure we were tackling our environmental issues. And I think sometimes when we just put something in, if we're not joining all of those parts together, then we're not actually creating that strong politics that we truly believe in. And even when it comes to things like the different food options, when I've been on a low salary and struggled to make ends meet, I didn't want to have the worst food options. Not that I eat chicken, but it's all of this stuff about chlorinated chicken, for example, and people say, oh, it's better for people with less money. The idea that because you've got less money you want to have worse food is just showing how there's vast inequality in this country and in our society. And I think that when we're talking about many of these standards, it shouldn't be costs that limits people who have access to things like good food, healthy food, or be able to, where you're able to buy your home means that you're less likely to be experiencing air pollution. I think there's so much joined up thinking that makes the best option, the easiest, most accessible for everyone, is what we believe in as Greens. And I think it's so vitally important that we do link that together.
So I guess the title of the talk today is The Bad Boys of Brexit. Obviously, as an MEP, you'll have to deal with like the bad boys of Europe, because obviously, you know, the context of Europe right now, we've got like the Estonian finance minister recently got elected and did like a neo-Nazi symbol when he was doing his swearing-in ceremony. We've got people like Orbán Viktor, who is, you know, tearing down press freedoms in his country of Hungary. You know, the Supreme Court of Poland having been, you know, pretty much sacked by the current government, things like that. So what I'd like to know is that as an MEP, what can you do to, you know, enshrine the democratic process within, you know, states in the EU who are currently under threat by a sort of right-wing populist rise in various states, and what can the Greens do to show an alternative to that like right-wing populist vision throughout Europe?
I think mainly it's our work on the committees in the European Parliament, so ensuring that they have to commit to certain standards. So, for example, today is Ida Hobbit, and you know, if that was something that had to happen across Europe, so International Day against homophobia, I'm going to get it wrong now, biphobia, transphobia, is that everything? I'm quite tired. But yeah, so you know, I'll take the issue of gay rights because it's something that across Europe, you know, it should be that whatever country you're in, you still have the same right, and we're not quite there yet. So it's things like that on the committees in the European Parliament we can make big changes to ensure that they have to live up to certain rights. I mean, I just know that today, you know, because it is Ida Hobbit, that for gay rights in particular, it's something that over the years in Britain we've managed to achieve, you know, pretty good advances on, but actually across Europe we're not doing as well. And so our influence is going to be huge, especially if we get double the number of Green MEPs there, and we can vote through really tough, strong legislation on human rights and civil liberties, equalities, those sorts of issues.
I think there was a question at the yeah.
Thank you everybody. It's kind of encouraging, exciting listening. What I'd like to know is, ideally I'd vote with my heart and it would be Green, and that's all very good, but the split vote.
Yes.
So I'm glad you brought this up. Because actually I know that I know hundreds of people will be asking exactly the same question. Would like to vote Green.
Yeah.
Don't want to risk encouraging a leave.
Yeah, sure. I'm glad you raised this because it's the thing that I have to get in usually to every answer at a hustings, every question in the media. Essentially, this is a proportional type of election. So it's the opposite of first past the post, which is what we're used to in this country in local elections and in the general election. And in the general election, for example, you know, you vote for one winner and everyone else is a loser. In this system, and it is quite a complicated system, it's not a perfect system of proportional representation. What we would like to see as Greens is something called standard transferable vote, where single transferable vote, where you'd use a ranking system. And I think that would work quite well actually in these elections. However, it's a system called the D'Hondt system. I am pretty geeky when it comes to elections, and even I don't fully understand the D'Hondt system, because last time there were 3 parties in this region who got very different numbers of votes. So the Lib Dems came last, and they got about 90,000 votes. We came 9th, so they came 10th, we came 9th. We got, I think, about 125,000 votes, something like this. And then Labour came 8th, so 3rd last, and they got 250,000 votes. So, you know, double what the Lib Dems got, yet we all returned 1 MEP. Okay, so that's how the system works. When you've got a region as big as the South East, on a proportional system where you return 10 MEPs, you cannot second guess how other people are voting. So it just tactical voting doesn't work in these elections. The Brexit Party will do well in these elections. The headline may be that the Brexit Party has won these elections, okay? You can't win these elections unless, you know, you've won every single seat in every single region, and that ain't gonna happen. What we need to do as a collective of Remainers is to ensure that the joint Remain vote, so the number of thousands of Remain votes or millions of Remain votes in the South East and across the country, is more than, say, the Brexit vote. Okay? And I'm confident that we might be able to do that. The Lib Dems basically are telling people that they need to vote pragmatically, that they need to vote Lib Dem. They're doing that because they think that will benefit them. At the moment, the Lib Dems have 1 MEP in the whole country, right? Scotland, England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. We have 3. So in terms of the facts in front of us, no polls, nothing like that, but what we can see in front of us is that if people want just to use this as a proxy referendum, and I would argue that we need to go further on that, and I'll come to that in a second, but if they just want to use it as a proxy referendum, and they want to give their vote to the biggest pro-Remain UK party, then the obvious choice is to vote Green. But I am serious about being in the Parliament for 5 years. You know, I didn't think we were going to have these elections a couple of months ago. We're in this situation. It's very likely that we will be there in 5 years. There's nothing, I don't think, that is going to happen in a negative sense between now and October. The only thing that could happen is the people's vote, and I believe that we will win that. And in 5 years, you know, you want someone working for you tirelessly, who will be your best advocate across the South East and in the European Parliament, and who will work on things like anti-austerity and fighting climate change. So with the Greens, you have the whole package, and you don't need to settle for second best in these elections. Does that answer your question?
It does, it's very helpful.
Isn't it the South East that came up with a pun of something like D'Hondt worry, vote Green?
Alex, you know you said that there were 8 in the polls, 8 Green MEPs, you know, which is fantastic. In the same poll, there are 10 Liberal Democrat MEPs. You can actually vote in this election, vote with your heart, vote with, you know, and get more Remain MEPs. It's not Liberal Democrats competing against Greens. We're so used to that in this first past the post system, aren't we? It's one or the other. In this, you need to get more people out to vote. That's what's incredibly important. And we can get more Greens, more Liberal Democrats, more Remainers. It's not one or the other.
We vote for a party with the list or the list. Is that how it works?
Yeah.
People are always asking me questions. It would be really useful to know.
So on your ballot paper, you will see party logos, and then you'll see some without party logos, and they're independent or Change UK in this region. And next to those party logos, you see 10 names. I think they're all full slates with at least the parties with logos, perhaps not the independents, they might just be one person. And that's because each party, just in case they win all 10 seats, they need 10 people there. But as Vic says, it's a range. You will elect essentially a range of people, and I think in a really democratic system that's a good thing. But you can vote not only with your heart, you can vote with your head, you can vote with both of them, and that is voting Green. I think the Lib Dems, they're doing it because they think they'll get more votes that way. I think that it's disingenuous because it plays on the fact that in this country the system is that we don't know how elections work. We've got different elections, they happen at different times, different systems, and at school we're never taught about them, so no one really understands whether they're 18 or they're 80, unless they're a political nerd like me. And so they're able to play on that and convince people that they need to vote tactically. But people shouldn't really vote tactically, I don't believe anyway, in local or general elections.
I tell my kids you mustn't, you should vote with your heart. My worry is I think the Lib Dems will do very well because of the sort of three usual main parties. They're the only ones who've said that they want to remain, and I think that's going to gather them a lot of support. Which again, and I agree, it's disingenuous and it's not necessarily about leading things properly.
Yeah, I mean, I think they will do well. I think we'll do well as well, And another real difference between us and the Lib Dems, because sometimes it comes up in hustings around, why don't you all go together on one Remain ticket? And there are lots of reasons why, that couldn't be the case. I mean, not least that 2 months ago we didn't know these elections were going to happen. So can you imagine the bureaucracy around a mixed party list and how that would work? And also Vince Cable never approached Caroline Lucas, yet he's saying that he has done that. Because again, it gives them political advantage, and that's the only reason. The Lib Dems aren't really here in Brighton and Hove, so I've never had to deal with them before. But I must say, they're awful because they're Lib Dems. But what I was going to say is, the only thing we have in common with the Lib Dems and Change UK, who are the only two other Remain parties in this election, is that we're all for Remain. We're all passionate about Remain, and that's clear, right? I mean, Change UK, I have no idea which group they will be in, actually, even though I've been sitting on hustings with them for the last 2 weeks.
EPP,
They probably don't know. And they're a very broad church of quite centrist, well, Labour and Tory, but maybe more right-wing Tory, but, really not on our page. And the Lib Dems are not like us, they did some good things in coalition, but they also facilitated austerity. And austerity is not a word, just a word, it's a real thing that's happening to real people even today. And they also did appalling things to tuition fees, where they said one thing and then they did something else. So I don't find them the most trustworthy of parties, but in the European Parliament, they sit in a group called ALDI, a bit like the supermarket, but with an E on the end. And that group is a real mixed bag of, I would say, centre-right politicians from across Europe. And their track record on things on climate change is appalling, especially if you compare it to some of the good work that they did around renewable energies and so forth when they were in coalition. So I think that's something to be very mindful of, that in this country we are electing politicians and we're looking at them from a particular party, but when they're elected into the European Parliament, they sit in a broader group, a bigger church. And as Amelia was mentioning before, we sit in the Greens European Free Alliance group. And we're the only, what makes us really distinctive is that we're the only group where we have a common European manifesto. So when I'm sitting here this evening talking to you guys about the European-wide living wage or the European-wide Green New Deal, there'll be MEP candidates across Europe, in Germany, in France, in Spain, talking to audiences about the same thing. Whereas with the Liberal Democrats, who knows what their other audiences are saying when they're in this group? Do you see what I mean? So it is completely different kettle of fish. But I'm so glad that you asked this question, because even amongst our membership, people have been questioning it. And, we've held this seat for 20 years. We're doing really well in the polls. People know that they can vote for what they want in these elections. We just need to get it out there and amplify that as much as possible.
Any other questions?
It's not really a question, I'm just trying to look it up. There's a lot of tactical voting websites around, but the best one I've seen is you can see how your personal views match with 25 votes that actually happened in the EU Parliament.
I haven't seen that one.
I'll tell you what it is at the end. I actually came out at 98% matched, mainly with European Greens. Ours were only 94%.
No.
And no one else really was there at all. It was all from the Green group matched with my personal views. So I'm going to find what the website is and I'll let you know.
I hope I beat you.
I always think that
On both counts.
all of those things, it's just the attempt to get 100%, isn't it? Like a test.
I think one more question.
Just what's the time? I don't have a...
It's 9 o'clock. Would you like to come out and ask a question? Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. I met Angela this evening, and I'm very passionate about the environment. I have to be honest with you, I'm not really too fussed about Brexit, which is not really popular. But my passion is the environment, and that's why I'm thinking about joining the Green Party.
Brilliant.
I think we've got bigger problems than Brexit looking ahead of us over the next few years, and I think possibly Brexit's a bit of a distraction, but my huge concern is the environment, and that's why I'm going to join your party.
Oh, lovely. Thank you.
One more question. And women. There was no gender impact assessment, was there, for Brexit? You two are wonderful representations of trying to put forward equality issues and issues around women's needs and etc. and protections. Can you find any word on women and equality?
Yeah, well, I mean, Leslie covered quite a lot of that in her opening remarks, and I've recently come back from maternity leave earlier this year, where I enjoyed 15 months off, I think that a lot of the rights that we have as women in this country are heavily protected by Europe, and actually the environment as well, massively protected by Europe. And my real worry is that all of these rights that have been built up over so many years of fighting for them will just stop pretty quickly as soon as we come out. So for me, Europe is also an insurance policy. It's my insurance policy, basically. Because I do not trust this government or future governments to make the right decisions on all of these things. But I think there's also, there's a big glass ceiling for women still, and we see that in the European Parliament actually, a lot of the highest positions within groups or across the three institutions of the Commission, the Council and the Parliament are dominated very heavily by men. And in our group, what will be really interesting going forward is the makeup of men and women and where that balance lies, because I do think a lot of the rights that we do enjoy have been down to having women as politicians, and it's so incredibly important, and it's not an easy thing for anyone to do, but I think we need more women in politics, essentially, and that's the way to do it. But I mean, I haven't got the figures in front of me, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Greens at the moment, proportionally in the European Parliament at least, have more women than men. And I know that on the council here, it's something that we've really managed to change, at least this time, where we've got 11 women and 8 men. So, it's very important for us to continue that good work that's happened for generations to get more women in.
And there are 4 women candidates on the Green.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yes.
So,
and that's the only party that
yes.
has that kind of equality issue on there.
Yeah, and that's replicated across a lot of the regions, you know, in the southwest. There are even more women, and they're
the northwest.
all at the top.
And
The northwest.
I think it's just
yes.
London and Wales that don't have a
So,
lead candidate that's
that's a
women.
Could it be that women take on the Brexit bad boys, or is that just a naive question?
But the thing is, it's not just the Brexit bad boys, it's the Brexit bad girls as well.
Yes.
And on that,
Yes.
there's gender equality, whichever this side of the spoke. So on that, and actually I should explain it to people that I have a namesake.
Yes.
Alexandra Phillips, and I'm Alexandra Phillips on the ballot paper, although everyone calls me Alex. But Alex Phillips is a very male name, and it's important for me, and I think for voters, to recognise a woman. So on the ballot paper there, I am Alexandra Phillips. And if people look a bit further down the ballot paper at the Brexit Party, they'll see that behind the number 2 candidate in this region, so after Nigel Farage, is also Alexandra Phillips. And so this has caused no end of difficulty for me, really, in that I've had people email me thanking me for comments that I've not made. And obviously I have to be very polite to them, hoping that they might change their mind and vote for this Alexandra. But also this week, Victoria Derbyshire show, and I couldn't quite believe this, given that my Twitter handle is Alex for Europe. And the other Alex is, well, she's Alex Brexit, but because she's Alex Brexit, she wouldn't have a Twitter handle that says Alex for Europe. I was copied in as the wrong Alex Phillips, and then they later had to apologise, and we're both quite likely to get elected, unfortunately. And well, unfortunately for, well, it's very fortunate for me that I should get elected, but unfortunate that we're in this situation that she will get elected as number 2 on their list. So I'm not sure what the precedent is for having 2 people of the same name, the same gender, representing the same region, and who look not too dissimilar from going forward.
Do you think the Brexit Party did this deliberately, or is that a conspiracy?
Someone did send me this. So someone sent me a Wikipedia page that said that some parties do it. I explained about the Lib Dems and the tactics that they use, and some parties apparently use these tactics where they put candidates up who have the same or similar names. Now, I actually don't. I think this is just unfortunate here, because people vote for a party, not a person. So you're not really voting for me, you're voting for our wonderful list and the Green Party. And I think it would have much greater impact in a local election or a general election where it's just people's names that you really focus on. But also I have met Alexandra Phillips before, because I was our second candidate running in the run-up to 2014, and she, at that time, was Nigel Farage's head of media in UKIP. And so I'd say I've met her before. I've been in the same room as her, unfortunately, because we were at the count together, and I realised then that we had the same name. But yeah, I think it will cause quite a lot of difficulties going.
Are you up for a debate with her?
Well, we have asked her for a debate.
Have you?
Yes, and she said, well, she
have
hasn't
you put
replied.
this out? Because this is getting back to the Brexit bad boys and girls.
Yeah.
We have to be ahead of them, really, and sometimes we can play catch up with them. I'm wondering if you put that out really on social media.
Oh, we have done.
I haven't seen it.
Well, I've tweeted about it.
On the Victoria Derbyshire show?
No, it was before that. It was when, the candidates were first kind of...
And what she said then?
Well, she hasn't really responded, but we have not debated each other, but we've both been down the line at the same time. Yesterday morning, we did BBC Radio, Kent and Sussex, I think it was. And it was a doorbell moment, but we didn't interact, really. So it just went from her doorbell moment to my doorbell moment, and then a question to her, and then a question to me, but we got to hear each other.
But they've got no manifesto, so
yes.
If you had
and they're a company.
If you had a discussion, there'd be no substance to.
So I've actually I've actually debated Alex Phillips.
Oh, have you?
Because she had a brief stint in Wales during the Welsh Assembly elections and then quit.
Was this in the UKIP then?
Yeah, it was in the UKIP. And she did one hustings and stormed out of it and then quit the list. And
Can we call her
Well, this is the thing.
Storm out then?
This is a person who could get elected to be an MEP. I mean, what can we do about this? It seems unbelievable.
Also, can I just answer your first question on the bad boys of Brexit as well? Because I am so angry at the point that we're at the moment, because that referendum that we had was a referendum about the voices of men. And, you know, there were a few women that got heard. We had to battle to get Caroline Lucas on the TV to talk about it. And she was a leading female voice. On the other side, obviously, there was Kate Hoey. But it just really wasn't a diverse mix of people. It wasn't a diverse mix of ages, of ethnicity, of people's abilities. I mean, it just was predominantly about men. And it makes me so angry that the future of our country can be debated by a minority, by a few voices that don't represent this whole rich and diverse country. And the fact that we've got to this point, we do need to continue to challenge that rhetoric. We can't forget that just a couple of weeks ago, Carl Benjamin was in the news because of his comments on rape culture and normalising rape. There isn't a single other party that would have got away with that without an investigation. And the fact that they've not taken him off the list won't challenging petitions that are essentially saying that people who normalise violence and rape culture should not be allowed to stand up as candidates shows that we've got so many battles to take on. And I think it's in the European Parliament the Green Group do have an incredible, rich, diverse, kind of number of women who are Scar Keller, our lead candidate, you know, there's beyond that, across the UK, we've got women who are in these lead candidate positions. And I just feel that it's about all of those rights that Alex was talking about. But I think there's also a stronger basis of we must be heard in Europe. We have to make sure, and in the UK. And we stand on the shoulders of giants when it comes to women's rights. And a lot of the things that we enjoy as women, whether that's maternity pay, whether that's getting closer to equal pay, you know, it's as a result of the fact that people were standing up and speaking out to make sure that we have that representation. And the fact that these people are coming along and undermining that work, that means that we're in a more hostile environment for diverse people, including women. It's just, I want UKIP, I want Brexit Party to take responsibility for the hatred that they've caused.
Do you think Brexit is our Trump moment in terms of women standing up and actually fighting for this? Because it feels like it has. I started Women for Europe a year ago, and you were the first woman politician to endorse the group, and I'm really grateful for that, because I was seeing that women were simply invisible and they weren't being heard.
Absolutely.
Do you think women should come out more? Is there a way we can encourage more women to vote? I mean, I think there's a lot of women don't vote. Absolutely. That the political process is for them.
And you'd be shocked how many doors you knock on, and people will say, you go to talk to them about the election, and they're like, oh, I'll just get my husband. Yes. And it's women of all generations, and I think there's still a concept that politics isn't about women and isn't engaging women. And I actually think one of the strongest things is to see women in politics. And I know that, especially as young women, and the fact that Sian, when she was mayoral candidate, all of those years, the first time all of those years ago, so many people came out and said, I've realised that politics isn't just about older white men. And I think that we've got a real duty to be making sure that we're seen as well as heard to inspire more people to get involved as well.
Thank you very much for coming, everybody. It's been a lovely conversation with you both.
Can I just have one more question?
Of course.
So, Alex, tell us.
I really have to go talking about women. I've got a thing.
Tell us how we can all get involved to make sure that you can get elected.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, we've had quite a short-lived campaign, but it's been very dynamic, I have to say. And thank you to everyone so far for everything that you're doing here and across the region. It really does make a massive difference. We're the only party, I think, in the South East, because I haven't seen any other parties that have done this, who has a battle bus. So even though we only had a few weeks to sort of sort it out, we have the Stop Brexit bus. Unfortunately, it has my mug on the side with Caroline and Rafi, and I'm not quite sure about that. But it is doing its rounds around the whole region. But here in Brighton and Hove and across the South East, the biggest thing that people can do is deliver, as I said before. I haven't done my fair share of deliveries this time because I haven't had the capacity to do it, because I've been doing hustings around the region and media work. But this election is about presence, not the things that we give each other, but how much we're seen. And that is still media, so big media, you know, on your TVs, on your radio, and I'll do as much of that as possible, and so will the other candidates. But really, social media has not taken over delivering leaflets through people's doors. It helps complement it to some extent, but people need to pick something up off their mat and open it. We do have the free post leaflet, which all parties are allowed to put out, but we can't guarantee that that's going to be delivered everywhere because we don't deliver it. We've printed about 300,000 leaflets, and Chris has delivered probably a huge percentage of them already. He's not joking. And so that is really what wins this election. So if you have any time between now and Thursday, if you could, even if it's just half an hour delivering leaflets, please do that. Thank you.
We also need to say on Thursday we need people to do things like telling and knocking up as well, because like just seeing somebody with a green rosette who's going to the polling station makes a massive difference, and turnout's expected to be fairly low, so I'll be certainly doing a lot of knocking up on doors on the day, and I hope that other people will consider doing likewise, because it makes a huge difference.
So thank you for all of the work that you have done, and I will also do a cheeky thank you for all the work that you will do. And do keep sharing things on social media as well. As Alex says, it's the leaflets that are important, but you need to be telling as many people about the power of voting for what you believe in and the power of voting green.
Thank you so much.